If abuse is happening, knowing where to go makes all the difference. In this video, Bob Blancato from the National Elder Justice Coalition and I are going to be talking about different agencies that can truly help you. At the end of the video, I'm going to cover some information on how to contact these agencies and find out more, and be able to start preparing yourself just in case. Because being prepared and being ready will make the difference too. Stick around. It's going to be a great one. On a little side note, before we begin, I'm still honing my interviewer skills. So the next question you're going to hear is, well, not the best. And in fact, it's like 8 questions all in one. However, we get to see the amazing professionalism that Bob Blancato has, because how he answered all of the questions without needing to have them repeated was masterful. So enjoy my little guffaw and truly enjoy the professionalism and Bob's ability to handle a bad interview question.
Let's talk about mandatory reporters. Now, you kind of mentioned the banks. I don't know if they fall under the mandatory reporter umbrella. I think they're more so now protected when speaking up about suspected abuse. But there are people out there that are professionals, such as nurses, doctors, therapists, EMS, police. If they see something that looks to be abuse, even long-term care workers, they are supposed to be reporting that suspected abuse. What can, families rely on, and what are they going to be looking for like that backup? Because sometimes families live across the country, so they're relying on friends and family in the workers in these facilities. How can they utilize a mandatory reporter, and what kind of protection does a family have if a mandatory reporter doesn't state abuse? That was a lot of questions. I'm sorry.
That's a complicated question because you've got different laws in different states on
Yes.
who's a mandatory reporter and what does it mean to be a mandatory reporter. I mean, it shouldn't even require thinking in the sense of if you're aware, it's the same principle as you have when you go to the airport. If you see something, say something. I mean, it's the same. We should be applying the same model in this situation. What I would say, I mean, now that we have, and I see that you have Gemini in your program here as well, folks can, just make an inquiry. What is the rule? What is the law in my state? Who's a mandatory reporter in Illinois? Okay, if my family's there. But I think the important thing is to establish a working relationship with a public agency, if somebody's in a different state. Yeah. Usually a state office on aging or an area agency on aging would be the place I would turn to. The places that's closest to where the individual may live. And then, if there is a mandatory reporting law, now how they're enforced is a different story too. There's pros and cons about mandatory reporting. Sometimes people are hesitant because of the consequences. I mean, even the person reporting abuse, right, since most abuse, as you well know, is family driven, it's family oriented, and the person who's being victimized sometimes is hesitant to report because of either consequences or just because of love of if it's a grandchild, whatever it may be. It makes it difficult for them to take the next step of getting to who it is that you're going to report it to. I mean, I've learned from talking to friends of mine who are prosecutors, that if they get to the point where they can actually prosecute a case, it takes a tremendous amount of effort to get the older person to be a good witness. And a good friend of mine, whose name you may know, his name is Paul Greenwood, who was a prosecutor out in San Diego, who does wonderful education around the country talking about these issues. He had a separate unit in San Diego that was involved in prosecuting. He learned how to train older witnesses to be effective in securing convictions. He set up a whole program to do that, and now he's out teaching other entities how to do the same thing. But I mean, we need to have mandatory reporting, but we need to both publicize it more and make sure it's being adhered to and followed by, and the states are monitoring it, because that's where the decisions are made at the state level.
As Bob and I were discussing, mandatory reporters are very important people in our community. They are people who are professionals and within their profession come in contact with people who may or may not be dealing with abuse. So during their education, certifications, their degrees, or their licensures, they are educated about being a mandatory reporter and the importance of knowing what to look for in an abusive situation. Teachers, for example, are taught how to look for abuse in children so that they can be that intermediary and that protection for children when they're in school. So are people who work in long-term care, people who work in hospitals and in therapies. Taking a line from Mr. Rogers, that beloved American icon, we have to look for our helpers. We have to find people in our community that can help us. Mandatory reporters are not the only people on the front lines to protect your loved ones. You are as well. Make sure that you know who those mandatory reporters are, so you know who can help you in case of emergency or in case you're not in the same town. Now, Bob mentioned something very important. If you live in California, your loved one lives in Arizona, knowing what the mandatory reporter guidelines are for Arizona are very important. And also, jotting down the phone numbers and contact information for the local long-term care ombudsman, area agency on aging, and adult protective services in the area that your loved one lives in is so important. So when you're in an emergency situation and you need to contact someone to help you, then you'll have the information nearby your loved one to contact, and they can help your loved one quicker. Mandatory reporters are professionals who are appointed by law to report any suspected abuse, neglect, or exploitation of adults who are vulnerable. All states have some form of mandatory reporter law. Typing in your state and then mandatory reporter law into your favorite search engine will produce results that you can use. Make sure if you're looking for a mandatory reporter for a child or for an elder, you type that into your search. Contact your local area agency on aging for assistance as to whom is appointed in your area. If a mandatory reporter does not report suspected abuse, they are subject to legal action. This list is not a complete list or a list that represents every state of the United States, but these are examples as to who could be a typical mandatory reporter. Doctors, nurses, dentists, therapists, licensed facility staff, like in a nursing home or other long-term care setting, home health workers, bank employees, police, fire, and emergency medical services. I cannot thank Bob enough for sitting down with me and sharing all this information for your benefit. I sure hope you found a lot of good information, and please thank Bob down below. His vast knowledge is unbelievable, and I cannot thank him enough. The National Elder Justice Coalition provides so much for all of us, and him taking time to talk to me is precious. All right, guys, just know that you are loved, you are appreciated, you are needed on this planet, and you are doing great things being a caregiver. Now go have a great day, and until we speak again, I wish you blessings.